Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the last installment of our series. We're glad that you're here and looking forward to the next hour with our wonderful guest. Before we get started, we got a few housekeeping items to go over. Nan?
Good afternoon, everyone. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. You should be hearing audio through your computer, and you'll want to make sure you have your speakers activated and turned on. If you have any trouble with that, you can email us at webinars@iafc.org, or you can use the chat function in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. And also in that upper right-hand corner, you will find a Q&A menu and a handouts tab. So you are certainly encouraged to introduce yourself and have discussion in the chat. And if you have questions for the panelists, please submit those in the Q&A tab. And then in the handouts tab, there's a couple of resources that may be useful for you. And now, Chief Gripe, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Nan. Well, before we get started, I want to say a big thank you to our sponsor. This is like I said, our third installment of this webinar series, and Rescue Air has stepped up and graciously sponsored us. If you're not familiar with Rescue Air, it is a company that specializes in FAR systems, fire air rescue systems. It's basically a standpipe that goes in high rises and or big boxes that allows firefighters to refill their air bottles right in the stairwell and not have to have a bottle brigade. I really encourage you to go to their website or just type in FARs to Google and learn more about it. We have it here in our jurisdiction, and it's proven to be quite valuable, and it's catching on throughout the nation. So please give them a look. And if you're not haven't had a chance to research it, it really is going to be a game changer for the fire service. So we appreciate their support. For those that may not know me, my name's Sam Graff. I am currently the Chief of Plano Fire Rescue, and I chair the IFC Terrorism and Homeland Security Committee, and I will act as kind of host/moderator today and get some really good conversation going with our guest. And on that note, our guests are Greg Castle, retired fire chief from Clark County Fire Department in Nevada, aka Las Vegas. Chief Otto Doze from Seminole County Fire, previously from Orange County, and been a long-time Metropolitan Fire Chief. We've got Dr. Dario Gonzalez, who is the Medical Director for FDNY, and we've got Dr. Reed Smith, the Medical Director for Arlington County Fire Department. And as you will see as we go through this, these gentlemen were selected for a purpose, given what today's topic is going to be about. From the fire chief's perspective, these fire chiefs have lived major events that they had to deal with, the type that are once in a career events for most people, and if that. And both of these medical directors have been front and center in some major national events and are very hands-on medical directors. So I think the dialogue we're going to have today is going to be phenomenal. My request is that don't be shy. Go into the chat function and ask questions, because rarely do you get a cast like this that you're going to be able to visit with and pick their brains. So we're looking forward to some really good chat over the next hour. So for that, we'll jump right in. Mass casualty incidents can happen anywhere. We always think of the 9/11s or the big, the Sandy Hooks, those type things. But the reality is you can have people gathered, and it's, as one of the doctors said the other day, it's very scalable. So this is literally whether you're from a small jurisdiction or you're from one of the largest cities in the United States, planning for mass casualty is something that you really should be paying attention to and getting prepared for. So with that, I'm going to start off and just kind of go around, but I'm going to start off with Chief Castle and just ask him, on that topic of planning, what are the main things that you've learned that they're just must-haves prior to the incident occurring, sir?
Well, to me, the must-haves are relationships, not just with the hospitals and the EMS providers and transport entities, but for us, success landed with law enforcement. Being able to know everybody's names, to have, almost a decade of training and planning on hostile MCI operations when we had our event saved us out. Helped us a lot with being ready to mitigate that situation that unfolded on us a couple years ago. Those things are I mean, there's people constantly changing and moving within the fire department, and especially at least in our police department here, Las Vegas Metro PD. So it's not you don't set those things up and then just that's where they're at. You have to continually meet the people that are transitioning into new assignments and out of one division into another that are now taking over something that you're involved in on their end. So it's a never-ending process of relationship building.
Thank you, sir. Chief Droz, what about you?
Yeah, I think certainly some of the same things. When I look at it, it's really about interoperability. Are you working with your community partners on a regular basis that is going to make the response like muscle memory, not like a new event, but like muscle memory? And then really the integrated response. When we look at many of the incidents that have happened, some of the downfalls early on were that we weren't getting to the patients in a timely manner. So really the new norm is stop the dying or stop the killing, stop the dying. And that's really, as you look at the events that have happened as of late, while there's been many more of them, the number of deaths have gone down in those incidents. So I think that's starting to resonate. And then when we talk about unified command and the communications, that is critical to really mitigating the scene. And then the public education or the public information part of it. How do you get the information to the people that need to know to really speed the recovery of not only the individuals, but the community as a whole?
Good stuff. So as EMS and fire, we know our job is to try to get viable patients to the hospital in order to, save their lives, but we got to get them to the hospital. But when you get them there, the hospital's got to be able to deal with these mass casualty situations. So with that, I'm going to start with Dr. Smith and ask, sir, what are the must-haves when it comes to being prepared at the receiving end at these medical facilities? What has to happen?
Yeah, it's a great question. When you look at improving survival in the aftermath of whether it's any kind of directed violence, whether it's a car into a crowd, whether it's a bomb, whether it's an active shooter, knifing or whatever. When you look at this, it's a system that crosses not just the hospitals, it's the entire public safety and community. So it starts with the active bystander on scene. They start the immediate medical care as they've been trained and empowered to do with programs like Stop the Bleed and Active Bystander and Until Help Arrives and First Care Provider. There's these programs that is then picked up by the public safety on scene response using things like the Tactical Emergency Casualty Care Guidelines for Rescue Task Force access to the patient, and then you bring them, and then it's the distribute the patients to the facility so no facility is overwhelmed, and then the hospitals have a piece. And I think when we look recently, we've been very good with civilian programs. We've been very good with fire and EMS working with police and addressing those concerns. I think the hospitals now have a piece of the preparedness, and they have to be able to not just assume that they got it because they're a level 1 trauma center. Not that they should never assume that they don't need it because they're not a trauma center. Everybody plays here, and the hospitals need to have a coordinated system within the hospital of notification, proper resourcing, care protocols, patient flow, information flow, all of these things. And I think that the link in the chain, the survival chain that we need to work on or start to consider is really working. And this involves public safety working with their hospital partners to say, what can we do to support you? Understanding that you have a great system when we're not in the midst of a mass casualty, but when we're in a mass casualty, everything goes out the door. We need to help support you because if the hospital fails, that reverberation goes back up the chain to public safety all the way to the scene.
Dr. Gonzalez, your takeaways, sir.
Well, that's very interesting. I agree with all of you. I think that, I always say, and I wherever I can, is that every facility, similar to what Reed was saying, is really a trauma center by default. Patients don't go that can leave a scene just to the trauma center. They go to what's nearest and what they recognize. And so what it means is that facilities don't have to beef up and become trauma centers, but they certainly do have to prepare to be able to handle an onslaught of patients, to be better able to separate out patients and to have a plan. And I think that is really critical, that needs to be coordinated with EMS and fire, that we need to know what's going on. I transported during 9/11, 5 patients to a hospital. They called me up, why are you sending me patients? I already have 200. And it turned out those were walking wounded that we never saw, that never went by EMS, never went by fire or police. They self-evacuated and went to a facility. I'm glad they called, because it wasn't hard to send a vehicle over there, remove those patients that we sent, and get them to another facility. But that facility should have been better prepared. Many of our facilities seem to think, I don't have to worry about it. As long as the trauma center can get them, I'm not going to happen. We've instituted a very aggressive plan with all the facilities. We have a lot of facilities. We have a lot of people, where we have different levels. We communicate with them. We have a level A, B, C, and D. D, no one wants to hear, because as all bets are off, everybody's getting whatever you get, and you better institute a surge plan and clear out your EDs and prepare for a large number of victims. Ideally, it would be, as sort of Reed said, trying to filter them to trauma centers and to places that could handle the higher level patients. But that's not a guarantee. And I think facilities make that mistake in thinking that their patient profiles are going to be consistent with what they get on a daily basis. So I think they need to look at that. We can talk about the myth of triage a little bit later on. But I think for the hospital end, they really need to look at what is the worst case scenario. Because many of them think that, you can turn the spigot off and things will stop. It doesn't always work that way.
Well, that dovetails into my next question, which is, really just want to keep it real with the real world. Like I said, you gentlemen were selected because all of you have been right in the worst nightmares that people can imagine. So, Chief Castle, I'm going to start with you. The Mandalay Bay incident, as I recall, you told me it was upwards of 500 people actually shot. Is that correct?
Yeah, more than 430 is kind of the statement we use, because there's some fluctuation between hospital county numbers still to this day.
Okay.
But, yeah.
So
in 60 killed.
So with that magnitude, that many people needing medical treatment, tell us some of the, I guess you could say, if there are any. I'm not wanting to plant a question, but there's a lot of things we plan for, and then when it really happens, it's like those plans kind of go out the door. So can you kind of talk about like aha moments where it's like, yeah, that looks good on paper, but when it happens in real life, it's not very good? Can you think of some of those takeaways?
Yeah, a couple of them right off the top of my head. One is the traditional triage programs just don't work. I hate to say that. I know the people that market that stuff probably won't be happy with me saying it, but people will get to the hospital. We had problems. We identified it later. Different cell carriers standing 10 feet apart, different cell phones 10 feet apart in that venue would Google hospital. Some of them would take them to Spring Mountain or Spring Valley Hospital. Some would go to Desert Springs. Some would go to Sunrise. So every hospital just got peppered with patients. Sunrise Hospital alone, over 200 gunshot wounds in an hour. One of the things that we learned, and we've instituted, called Medical Area Command, when we have something like this go down, should we have it again, is to send engine companies to every hospital to check in with the charge nurse. So the captain meets up with the charge nurse. The charge nurse should know that they're coming. We put together some books to put in I don't know if they're getting used. Honestly, I don't know if the charge nurses get onboarded with that when they come in as a new charge nurse. But the idea is the captain checks in with the charge nurse, and then they can take over things like triage. They can manage things outside, because we learned that with Henderson Fire, one of our neighboring jurisdictions, happened to have an engine and rescue ambulance at Sunrise Hospital when this whole thing unfolded. And those medics and those crews ran, a significant portion of that triage. The medics can intubate, they can decompress chest, they can do things that the nurses can't do. And quite honestly, when something like this happens, you need the nurses to do nursing stuff, especially the charge nurses. They need to have their hands in managing their ER. and not standing in the ambulance bay with 50, 60 people laying on the ground that are all wounded. So we put that together. We put, just in a nutshell, we have an unassigned battalion chief just goes up on that channel. Engine company, 33 would run over to Sunrise and become Sunrise Division. So just using basic ICS stuff, they check in with that BC. The BC manages it all the way to the point where we told them at one point, one hospital ran out of chest tube trays. That medical area command at BC and those captains at those hospitals can coordinate with hospitals that don't have any patients at that time. We had 15 hospitals and some of them didn't see anything. We can arrange for their supply of chest tube trays to be brought down real quick by a police car or an ambulance or something to help with this situation. Just outside the box things that we didn't plan on. So we learned a lot there. That was a big aha moment. But those patients getting to the hospitals in droves that we never got our hands on was pretty enlightening. We have a big fancy mass casualty rig with every bell and whistle on it, and it just sat there.
So is it fair to say that you can have a mass casualty incident at a specific location, but in reality, what happens then is that mass casualty just gets moved to a different location because there's still going to be that bottleneck at the hospital then? Okay.
Absolutely. MCI moved to 5 different locations and created mass havoc.
So I'm going to ask then, I'll start with Dr. Smith from the hospital view. We'll reverse the polarity. We're used to being out on the scene in the fire service, but what kind of chaos is that creating at the hospital, and what have y'all learned of that doesn't work. This is how we need to do it.
Well, that's a great question. I was going to ask if I could comment on that because what Chief Castle did and what they did in that was it was ad hoc. That works. What we know it works. What we want to do from the hospital perspective is the hospital needs to know what's coming and what can support them. So the hospitals need to have what we call a first 30 minutes plan. So what do they do in the first 30 minutes? Then you have your next 6 hours. Then you have your kind of next 18 hours. But in that first 30-minute plan, they can't magically, increase their number of nurse staff, increase their number of, techs. Though it takes time for those people to come in. And so where the system will fail is in that first 30 minutes to an hour when, 250 people show up at Sunrise, level 2, Sunrise, and they don't have the staff yet to be able to take care of that. And that's where the fire department comes in. The fire department and EMS systems can dispatch, personnel, not a lot, but just some to assist the hospitals. And we created in Arlington County what we call the hospital task force. So at the onset of any act of violence, part of the dispatch, we dispatch the scene. We also dispatch an engine company or 2 engine companies or an engine company to the hospital, to the closest hospital, because automatically that gives them additional personnel and bridges them until they can get their own personnel in. It's a great idea on paper. If the hospital doesn't know that's the plan and what to do, when 4 guys walk in off an engine, in turnout gear, and they go, "We're here to help," the hospital goes, "Well, what are you guys doing here? We don't have any patients, or we don't know what's going on," or, so the hospital has to be included. And that's what I said earlier on about that chain of survival. Public safety must go to their hospitals and say, "We understand you're a good trauma center. We understand you're a good hospital if you're not a trauma center. We understand you know how to take care of patients." In mass casualty, we are automatically partners. We must sit down ahead of time and hash out how we're going to work together to make sure that the integrity of that chain. So, from a hospital's perspective, they're going to love it. That, you're going to give us, 4 or 8 people to help us move patients, and your paramedics functions just like nurses, and they can do the outside triage, which frees us up inside. You've got firefighters there that are used to carrying, equipment and gear around. They can move beds for us. They can move patients for us until we can get our system ramped up, because their system isn't as fast to ramp up as public safety is. And so I think the key here is that the hospitals have to know and have to be in agreement, and that planning has to take place between public safety and hospitals. And it's not, we go in the door and we say, "We're here to help you, to support you till you get what you need." Not we're telling you what to do. We're not taking over. We're not better than you. It's that sense of what we can do to support you.
Yeah, and that's, you're 100% right, Dr. Reed. That book, right, that we put in the ERs is just a bullet points. This is what the fire department can do for you, nurse. Look at this. They can do this. They can do this. They can do this. They can do this. This is what they're there to do. Really simple, down and dirty. Just help them absorb that this is what they're there for. And then we saw it work. I mean, it was like It was just a luck that that engine company was there, but we really could use them at Desert Springs, at Spring Valley, at UMC Trauma. We could have used them at many other hospitals that just got overrun that night.
So I said we were going to let this kind of go where the audience takes us, and we've got a really good question that's come in that I guess would probably, I'm going to ask Dr. Gonzalez to take this, and then Dr. Smith as well. But the question from the audience is there any issues with your EMS providers not having clinical privileges to practice in the emergency room or with the state EMS office? So we can send these resources to the hospital, has been announced. But when they get there, are they allowed under y'all's license to work and do the things that they would normally do out in the streets? Dr. Gonzalez, you go first, please.
Well, the short answer is yes. We don't really have our providers go to the facilities. We feel that they need to be out in the field. We need to maintain the 911 system, and we control it that way. So we really do not operate within the medical facilities. And that's, sort of the way the system works here. And so we don't have privileges, and that's a big thing in New York City, that you have to have privileges working within a facility. It helps and to have that, but we don't have that here. What we look at is how can we better prepare the hospitals, give them earlier warning, and then try and better control our transports. And that's how we do it, and that's how we've done it before. I still have, I'm very lucky. I have 65 facilities, and I have a lot of EMTs, a lot of medics, and a lot of engines. So, and I can transport by police car if I need to. So we can really spread things out. So in a way, we're very much luckier than some of the smaller places that are around. Reed?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we don't have that issue. We don't have an issue. There's no law that says you can't be an EMT inside. You don't have to have privileges. The techs that are EMTs that are, they work for the fire department and they work on the side for the hospital. They don't have privileges in the way that you're describing privileges. There is no problem if you get run over by a car in the parking lot of the hospital and we respond there because you're in the parking lot and we're helping get you into the emergency department from the ramp that you're out in front of the hospital on the hospital campus. Doesn't make a difference. And I would argue that in Vegas, the vast majority of the patient treatment was in the parking lot because they had 200 patients in the ambulance bay. That's on hospital property, but it's not inside the hospital. We're not sending paramedics into the operating room. What we're doing is the mass casualty has moved essentially, and we're supporting the influx of patients. There is no issue with do you have privileges? There's none there at all, because this is an emergency scene, just like any other emergency scene. The hospitals, and by the way, in our hospital, the third floor of my hospital is a bunch of private physician offices that when they have chest pain, they call us. And we're like, well, you're in the hospital, go downstairs. We need to put him on a stretcher, having to take him down. It's a building just like any other public or business in the community. We have because we are authorized to work in the community, and they can practice their skill wherever they want. The hospital not to mention, this is a disaster. It's not, I wouldn't send them there on a regular basis, but this is our disaster response. So there are no issues with credentialing. There are no issues as long as they're wearing our uniform and they're working under our protocols. It's not a problem. That's how it is in DC, in Arlington.
Well, during the disaster within the facility, a fire within the hospital, we actually did operate within the hospital in order to move patients, to actually do some intubations, remove patients that were in the ICU. And I personally gone and cared for people in the neonatal ICU when they lost power. And, when you look at Sandy, yes, we were operating there. But as a policy, we do not send our EMTs and medics into the facilities.
So
Yeah,
on
I think
that same topic,
the magnitude of incident that we're talking about, I think we're going to operate where we need to operate when we need to operate, and that's just the reality of the size and scope of these types of incidents.
So
we actually had some resistance when we put together Hospital Area Command and pitched it to the county and state health oversight groups on that exact same thing. Paramedics don't work inside the hospital. And I was perplexed, and we had a couple meetings on it. And towards the end of the second meeting, when we didn't make any ground, I said, okay, guys, I get it. You don't want us operating in your hospitals, but what happens when somebody comes in and shoots up the third floor of your hospital? You going to take care of that, or are we going to come here and take care of that? And that ended the conversation. We had immediate support at that point in time. They looked inside and said, "Oh, we can't do that."
So
I think it's addressing their concerns, Greg. I think it is. It's again, you don't go in and say, "Hey, we're going to take over." It's we're here to support you.
We're here to help.
We can offer you. Let's come up with this plan before it happens, so we're not doing it ad hoc between a battalion chief and the charge nurse standing outside the ER that night. Let's go ahead and look. It is that conversation that happens beforehand that says, "Here's what we can do to support you." Right? That's so it's not threatening in that manner.
Absolutely. Yeah, we weren't trying to take anything over. We just wanted to help.
So Otto,
It wasn't viewed that way.
a question. When we all visited last week in regards to this webinar today, we talked about and covered a lot of ground. I wish we'd have recorded that one because it was very free flowing. But we talked about, again, like, triage, the way it's written in paper doesn't really translate in real life. So Otto, I want to ask you, because obviously you've had the big event down there with the Pulse Club. When it comes to patient tracking, what are some of the myths? Because, again, there's lots of models out there, but what was the best one that wound up being that actually came the closest to working for you, if you don't mind?
Gosh, that was a real difficult one, especially when you're in the midst of the event and you have people pouring out of a building, and a lot of them, we were in the fortunate and unfortunate state that we had a hospital within the trauma center within 3/4 of a mile. So you had people carrying people to the hospital, people taking people to the hospital in the back of pickup trucks, which at the time I didn't really think was appropriate, but it saved lives and can save lives if you're in close proximity. But one of the things that we've looked at, and I think are some of the best ways to do it, is there's all these fancy systems out there, but the best way is to take a picture with a cell phone and, write down which hospital they're going to, because that really negates a lot of the issues that you have post-scene with hospitals not wanting to give information because of HIPAA and some of those other things. But in order to mitigate that on the front end, what we really learned is, we have to be able to manage these scenes. And so it's not just about the first alarm assignment to an MCI or even the second alarm assignment. It's getting the right amount of command officers that are going to be able to resource your branches, divisions, and groups, and sending the appropriate people to the hospital to have that coordination piece, so that you can have that with your transport section as well.
So to Dr. Smith, we talked about this the other day. Go disaster mode in the hospital, because again, our normal way we do business changes dramatically when it becomes a mass casualty. So when it becomes a mass casualty in your hospital, what do you have to get out of your comfort zone with and go, we got to change this, like tracking of narcotics or patient charting, those type of things? How much of that kind of has to just be like truncated down to save lives?
Go ahead, Dario.
Well, that all goes out the window. I like the bed sheets. You'd be surprised what you can write on a sheet that stays with the patients. It depends. It escalates. Electronic records are totally useless. Laboratories have to be able to take verbal orders and to be able to take things without medical records. You can set up for a disaster where you have these disaster numbers that clerks have that say this is patient A1 from disaster. But what we found when we tried to implement that in a big event with a bus accident, that they couldn't get it out fast enough to get things moving. People need to go to the OR. People need to go get CTs. People need to get x-rays, bloods, and waiting for those things is very difficult. So hospitals really have to look at how do you expedite those things. And the quickest way that I found is go back to paper. Experienced people can write basic things down. With drugs, I think Reed and me had the same thing. At the end of a disaster, I found a bunch of drugs in my pocket, and I said, maybe I better get rid of these before the police come here. But I think that that's a plan that has to happen at the facility. I think those medical records that we institute should not be electronic. They should be paper. and we should get minimal information and go with that. I think that we need support, hospitals need support from local governments that start to help them out and say, well, you don't, because you get somebody from the Department of Health and come in and say, well, you didn't have this, this, and this. You didn't follow this procedure. You didn't do this. Even if you saved a life, you still have to deal with those issues. And I think they have to be more realistic on how they really help us out. So I think that you really need to move away from those things of
I think Dario froze there for a minute.
Yeah.
Let me add a couple
we
things.
become so electronically, we're gone.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dr. Stewart.
Yeah, you froze there for a second, Dario. I think Dario's spot on. The big things here is the hospital has to change the way they do things, and that includes I think in the Pulse nightclub, I heard a great presentation that they quickly went away from their medical record, and they literally had those little those little handheld like little notebooks that you can flip over. They literally wrote trauma Jane, gunshot wound chest, ANSEF given, fast negative, and that's the record. That was it. It was a little piece of paper, and they did that ad hoc. And so this idea that that the hospitals love to maintain minute level control, and in these situations they cannot. I think that it also helps for the hospitals, and this would help with again with that conversation with public safety. But the hospitals have treatment protocols, so we know that everybody who has any kind of penetrating trauma, everybody gets ANSEF. Everybody gets it. Everyone gets ANSEF. Everyone gets a tetanus shot. Everybody or something. So you have these protocols, so they don't need a doctor to say, I need to see every patient, which they do now. The other problem in the hospitals is we are so used to throwing everything at one patient. We have one patient who comes in from ejected from a vehicle. We take the entire trauma team, 2 trauma doctors, the CT scan, the MRI, everything at this one person, and you can't do that. And we've seen that. We saw it at Pulse. We saw it at some of the other places where we are so focused on the one patient, we lose the bigger picture. And so sometimes it takes an astute, in the case of the Pulse nightclub, it was an astute charge nurse who grabbed the physicians and said, look, we can't, this person is dead. We have to then move to people who are still alive because we're so not used to doing that. We'll work on somebody who's dead for 45 minutes or an hour to try to save them. Well, in this case, we can't. And so it's this entire philosophy change that has to occur in the hospital, from streamlining how we move patients, from the treatment protocols to, exactly. You can't expect me to tie every narcotic to every patient because we don't even know the name of the patient. All I know is this person's got a bone sticking out of their leg and they're burned. I need to give them pain medicine now. I can't wait and have their driver's license registered. And so it's a total different process. And Dario's right. The hospitals need some kind of regulatory assistance, but that conversation starts with the hospitals going, we need regulatory assistance, and so again, I think it's a complete different approach in the hospitals.
So the other day when we talked, Greg, you brought up some valid points, you and Otto both, as well as the docs. And so we're already over halfway through. So I want to kind of get to some of the other points. And one of them was the aftermath, things that you don't even think about that go on for some time after the patients have cleared. And one of the ones that you had discussed was just the donation aspect of it. Can you kind of just hit, not necessarily on that one thing, but just kind of encapsulate for some of the things that you're going to have to be considering that are going to occur from the after effect of an event like this?
So we experienced a lot of that stuff. Donation management became a real challenge. We have all these people here in this valley, 2.3 million people, and part of their trying to heal or be part of the response and support their community was to bring things to the Family Assistance Center where we had things set up to reunite families and take care of business. It was overwhelming. We had so much stuff, but you don't want to say quit bringing us stuff because, like I said, that's part of the community's trying to heal and support each other. So we had to put people in charge of that, and they had to manage that stuff. And then once they took it in, they would reach out to shelters across town, children's shelters, women's shelters, battered and abused shelters, homeless shelters, whatever, and they distributed that stuff so that what was donated would not be lost or go bad. just because we didn't need that much stuff there at the Family Assistance Center. But it's an important part to let the community be involved in that donation process.
Okay. Otto, one of the things that we had discussed, you talked about help comes from a lot of places, and sometimes it's just the civilians that happen to be there. Can you kind of touch on the role that the civilians played in helping out at the Pulse incident?
Yeah, I think it started in the initial stages of the Pulse incident when they were carrying people and shuttling them to the hospital. But I think it went well beyond that. When you talk about some of the post-incident types of problems, the family reunification, when you have people coming internationally and you have to deal with the different consulates. And then when you have to when you look at, okay, where is your reunification center, that changed 3 times throughout the Pulse incident until Disney actually came and rehabbed an entire building in the scope of 24 hours. And when we say they Disneyfied it, they did. And they actually, that's where the community partnerships come in, and that's where the civilian component played a large part in bringing that back to some state of normalcy. The other part is how are you providing for not only the civilians but the first responders in the aftermath of it, and that becomes a critical piece on really healing the community. We talked about attending and staffing multiples of funeral sessions and things like that, and then of course those all play in. And the street where the businesses were, when we talk about civilians supporting the street where all the federal agencies were brought to bear and everything else, those businesses were closed for weeks on end, but those businesses came and opened and fed all the first responders that were there for weeks on end. So that's just another manifestation of those civilians helping out with an incident response.
Chief Castle, as I recall from your incident, bystanders played a huge role in actually not just assisting at the scene, but the actual transportation of the patients. Is that correct?
Yes, bystanders were phenomenal in that aspect. They commandeered buses, cabs. They somehow found the keys to a police department marked unit pickup truck and loaded people in the back and drove it down there and then called and apologized for stealing the truck. They got a one-time pass on that night, by the way. They did a great job, and the amount of lives saved, we can't even add it up. The belts, the stuffing wounds with T-shirts, all the tourniquets, and all the stuff that they did on scene saved countless lives that night.
So, Dr. Gonzalez, one of the things that you had hit on, and Dr. Smith as well, but I think it bears really emphasizing, is you said every hospital becomes a trauma center, and sometimes the closest one really is the best one. So in that respect, you said you had 65, and it goes back to the scalability that we talked about last week, but with that many medical facilities, do you surge medical resources because obviously you have a very large city. In other words, would physicians and nurses come from other hospitals and go to the ones that are getting the patients, or is that something that's really not done in the hospital environment?
Well, we're actually doing it more and more. We've been pushing that since 9/11. Well, we had trauma centers that were underutilized and other centers that were overutilized. And so what they have within the city now is basically universal credentialing. And so trauma surgeons can move from facility to facility and within systems. And so that's been actually developed within the trauma community itself because they recognize that deficit. So they are actually able to send a trauma physician from one location from the other. But it's not just the trauma physician, it's the resources, the supplies, it's the scrub nurse who runs the whole show. It's not the doctor who runs it. And so they're getting more and more with that by doing in advance this sort of very quick, rapid credentialing. They used to say, well, we'll just do a rapid credentialing, but you can't do it fast enough. And so that's actually being done. And that seems to be moving very well. The other thing is we don't necessarily have to bring the physician. One of the things that we found is we have a mass disaster plan for pediatrics and for burns. Burns don't go to burn centers, but doctors that don't deal with burns traditionally get very nervous when somebody has third-degree burns over 2/3 of their bodies. We want to save burn beds for salvageable patients, as terrible as that sounds. And no, any facility can manage a burn patient for 24 hours. It's really very straightforward. But to make people more comfortable, what we did was we set up a system where they could call and get minute by minute consultation from the burn physicians in the city. So they could just call and say, here's what we at, this is what it's going, here's a picture of the patients. And now with the electronics, we can do that. And does it violate HIPAA? I don't know, but I'll let them come find me later. During a disaster, I think HIPAA is ridiculous. It should just get thrown out. And so that's actually worked. And same thing for pediatrics. Pediatrics is a tough field because you have so much to lose if you blow it. And so what we've done is we actually have a virtual pediatric consultation service for pediatric intensivists at our hospitals, where they actually sign on and they will provide, they can be available in like 10 or 15 minutes, and they rotate for the year, and they're willing to do it, and they can provide advice as to management and care. And they can actually later on provide triage information to the centers to decide which kids are actually going to go to pediatric centers or going to stay where they're at, or there really is nothing you can do and just provide comfort care. So I think that the pediatricians and the burn people are moving out of their comfort zones. The trauma people are moving out of their comfort zones where they say, I can only work here, and are expanding that. Because the trauma surgeon at a hospital in Brooklyn is no different than a trauma surgeon in Manhattan or a trauma surgeon in Plano. You think about it, it's a wasted skill to sit there and not provide care. So they're looking at it that way, where we can actually, instead of, we can move patients, and we don't do interfacility transports, but we will absolutely do them during the disaster. But we can also provide transportation to bring some of the people to the facility. And when those people have to cover many facilities, we can do that by using almost a telemedicine type situation.
Well, Otto, Greg, I'm going to ask you regarding the partnerships with law enforcement and the role. And I'm not talking about their role of stopping the killing. We know that initially that's what they're there to do, is to get that part. But beyond that, can you touch on the importance of having that relationship and the things you're going to depend on law enforcement for once they get the bad guy taken down? Otto, you go first, please.
Okay. Yeah. So that was really one of the issues that we identified after the Pulse incident that really led to the development of NFPA 3000 is that integration between law enforcement wasn't as strong as it should have been or could have been, and that was really one of the major sticking points. There wasn't that well coordinated effort. There wasn't the unified command that really had us be able to integrate that scene a little bit different, and that's much different than I believe what Greg's experience was with his law enforcement, and I'll let him speak to that. But that's one of the things that I had seen that has gotten better over time, especially with the advent of NFPA 3000, and really looking at these types of responses from a whole community perspective that not only integrates police, law enforcement, fire, EMS, the hospitals, but the community itself, because we know from some of the experience of the people on the call and others that they play a critical role in being able to save lives.
Greg?
Yeah, so we did have a good relationship, still do, but it's always a work in progress. As I said, people retire, people move assignments, so it's continual work there. We do teach what's called FD 101 in the police academy, and then they teach a PD 101 in our fire academy. So through attrition and time, the officers and the firefighters will have had that exposure to each other and what they provide and how to collaborate and what each brings to the table during big events. as they, firefighters become captains and they go up, they're used to this integration. We still have some sticking points at some of the older, more senior members of both organizations, but we've made tremendous progress in that. Having that relationship, I actually took a picture of it. I use it in the presentations when I go speak on this. It's an org chart. It's a wire diagram, and in the top it says Unified Command, LVMPD, CCFD, FBI. I took a picture of it because we'd worked so hard to get that to that point over years, that to have that thrown up on the board in the first few hours of that event at the command center at the police station right next to the hotel was really good to see. So it's very important. We've got to have it.
Thank you. So we're well inside, less than 15 minutes left. So for our audience, if you have questions, please get them sent in. This is your chance to ask some of the best minds in the business what you want to know. In the meantime, I want to go to Dr. Gonzalez, because when we spoke last week, sir, you brought up something that in America we don't think about, but you brought up the experience of what has happened, and there's nothing to stop it from happening in America. We tend to think we're bulletproof, but you talked about the hospital that wound up being the secondary assault, that it was get them in there and then turn around and do it again. Can you kind of touch on that and the importance of making sure law enforcement takes a role in hardening the hospital?
Thank you. Yes, it was actually very, very sad. I had spent a lot of time in India doing work with one of the hospitals, and it was a very poor hospital. It was a government hospital, huge facility. And and we had practiced mass casualty and integration of police and fire transports as best we could with limited resources. And there was an event where there was an explosion at one of the gas stations or somewhere outside the facility. So patients were scooped up, brought in by rickshaw, by truck. We use rickshaws for moving patients. So a truck is actually a step up. And really everything, they even stole an ambulance and moved from one of the other hospitals and moved patients, and they kept bringing people in. And what happened was that when they did that, some of the people that were coming in with patients were actually terrorists. And what they did was they actually ended up putting propane cylinders right by the ED. And they ignited that and killed many physicians, destroyed the emergency department, and killed many patients there. The place was not secured, and there was, again, the concept, they thought everything is over there, nothing is over here. And I don't see that any different from happening at any city facility or any other hospital. We tend to think that an active shooter is an active shooter in one location, one person, one thing, but a coordinated attack or a coordinated event by two people can really be a disaster.
So I'm going to, with the time we got remaining, we're going to kind of do like a sports center speed round. We've had a lot of questions come in, and people have been very appreciative of y'all's time, and the response has been great about it being real world. But I'm going to sum up kind of what it sounds like that they're asking, which is, we've talked about normal day-to-day systems have to go out the window, and you have to, what we've all been trained on necessarily when it actually occurs, it's not the way we thought it was going to be. So I'm going to go around and ask everybody to kind of concisely, if you could design training for now that you've been through these, either on the EMS side at the hospital or on the field side. And Greg, I'm going to start with you. What would you now train on that is like the aha moment about, we've been getting this wrong, this is how you better do it? You go first.
Well, I would push to revamp the way we think about the triage in the streets and certain instances like that, because it's frustrating when you plan and you train and you train and you train, and then it doesn't happen, right? It's just it's not possible to do that triage in the streets of that magnitude. And anticipate those the support of the hospitals. We really have to come up with the plans, push that out, get to know your hospitals, get to know your hospital administrators, so that they can push the support within their hospitals and the health districts. I would go down those lines right there, because the men and women in the fire and EMS, that their boots are going to hit the ground. They're going to do what they do. But when you anticipate a system that you've trained on and bought things for, and then it doesn't work, it's frustrating. And that's an additional stress that our people don't need to have. So educate them on the fact that it's not going to go as planned, and it's probably going to go in a direction like this. Be ready for that and be ready to support that.
Otto?
Yeah, so I think we have to fundamentally rethink the chain of survival, and we know from experience that citizens can play a critical role in that chain of survival. So how do we do that community outreach to give them the knowledge, tools, and the ability to really make an impact in those initial moments? Because we know that most of these events are over before the first responders get on scene. So the true first responders are going to be those citizens that are there. And then, I don't think you throw out necessarily the traditional training methodologies, but you do have to have an integrated approach. Make sure it's muscle memory with the agencies that you're going to be training with. That way, once you have those fundamentals, when those things happen that go outside of how you trained, you're able to adapt and overcome and really format the scene in a way that's going to fit the reality that you're being faced with.
Dr. Smith?
Well, I think there's two things. I agree with what Chief Drod said. That we have to empower our citizens, and honestly, stop the bleed or a stop the bleed course where you're just dealing with tourniquets and bleeding is not enough. We want to stop the clock on all causes of preventable death, not just external bleeding. So we have to empower them beyond just teaching them how to use tourniquets and put a pressure dressing on a wound. But really, I think that the answer to the question is, how do we prepare from a public safety is we've got to be realistic in our expectations. Both Chief Castle and Chief Drod, you guys have dealt with issues that really the outliers. The vast majority of these events are, somewhere in 5 to 10 people wounded, 5 to 10 people killed. And that the data says that. And that's really where we start our planning, not with these overwhelming 250, 500 people, 35 people, 100 injured. We'll get there. But you start with kind of 5 to 10 wounded, 5 to 10 killed, and you start there. I think that's what it is. And really, when you look at the failure in these events, the failure does not occur with the paramedic or the firefighter or the EMT on the street. The guys and girls on the street will get it done in real time. The failure always occurs at our level, right? It's at the command level. And so if you're going to practice something, practice unified command, getting together, getting on the same page. Because when presented with a problem, you take a firefighter and you take a paramedic or EMT and a police officer and you put them together, they will figure it out in real time. We just don't give them the support they need. So I think the failure is almost always at the command level. And if you spend your time working that command level, organization, communication, it will trickle down. But it's kind of realistic planning, empowering the citizen, and working on unified command in those relationships at the command level.
Dr. Gonzalez?
I agree with everybody. But I think that, one, I want to mention the bystanders. I think we tend to look at them as interfering and being bothersome. We try to get them away. I think they're a resource that we have to use. And people, if you direct people what to do, they will do it. You saw it in Boston, and we see it in different places. Secondly, I think that triage to me is really a two-phase thing. That it's really, the first part of triage is just sort. They're dead or alive. That's all I want to know. And anybody can be trained to do that, and anybody does. I've done it around the world with people that work in cafeterias or with the security guard where there aren't resources, and dead or alive with no fault if you make a mistake on either side. I can't hold you responsible for that. And people are very, very good at that. They really manage that very well. And then we can worry about sorting this other stuff later on. So if we can just figure out who's dead, who's alive, and separate them out, that's going to reduce our numbers. And two, I think that a lot of our disaster plans are really, great textbooks. They're huge, they're large, they're complicated. I can't figure out what the hell to do. So make a simple plan that everybody knows that everybody can do, and I can teach it to somebody very quickly and tell them, go do this, go do that. I think that that's critical. The other part is we constantly fail to appreciate the psychological trauma on our EMTs, medics, police officers, and firefighters. These are horrific events. We tend to see them and we tend to be a little jaded, and we sort of survive them reasonably well. But a lot of our younger people, a lot of our young medics and EMTs don't. We've had suicides. We've had questionable deaths. We had a physician that killed herself. And so I think we need to address that early on in training, where we get rid of this myth of the strong, powerful person that doesn't, call for help. That's a sign of weakness. That I think we need to better take care of our people. But I really think that for me, triage is just transport. Get them off there. I don't want to know that they're green or red or orange. I just want to know that they're gone. And hopefully we'll have those numbers. And I agree with Reed. We need to work on, if you can't do a bus accident with 20 people, what makes you think you're going to be able to deal with a building collapse with 100 people? Doesn't make any sense at all.
I would also throw in there that for starting to training programs to especially for police fire integration, walk before you run. We would have people try to do these drills where, okay, we got 40 people shot, we've got a couple bombs, there might be a chemical bomb in the back, and all these little things, and it's sunk. Everybody fails at those things. You got to walk before you run. Make the course or the class or the process successful, so that those incident commanders that are getting to know each other have a good at bat, they have a good success, and then things can get more complicated from there if you need to.
Yeah.
But just the fact that they have a good run at a drill that was simple and straightforward, and then they develop that working relationship is really going to pay off in the long run.
So is it fair to say, much like we teach our young company officers incident command, and we start with the house fire before we build up to the 747 of hemophiliacs and buses, crashes into, train full of children. So, in other words, get really good at that. I love the muscle memory that has been stated, because I think that's very important. So, some of the takeaways then, kind of encapsulating this is, I've got relationships, which we hear that all the time, but it's truly relationships between the hospitals, between the EMS, obviously is probably the one that's there more often than not anyway, but really integrating with our law enforcement and having, some of the stuff we didn't talk about today, we didn't get a chance to, but that Dario brought up, traffic management, making sure that you're keeping the path that gets you to the hospital, and keeping, the people just don't pull up in their cars and block everything, so that we can't get the sick and injured into the emergency room, or at least to the outside triage area. The other thing was just planning. Make sure that you start small, crawl before you can walk, but plan. But be ready to pivot is what I'm hearing you gentlemen say. In each case, you had to pivot and go a different direction, and not necessarily get locked into any one particular plan. So I think that's important for everybody. And then just to remember, it's all scalable. I think, I can't remember which doctor it was the other day we talked, but they said that someone said, well, this could never happen to me. They were in a small town, and they asked them, well, do you ever have a gathering? I think it was Dr. Smith. Do you ever have a gathering of 50 people? And they're like, well, of course. And it's like, well, someone comes in and shoots 6 people. What are you going to do? And it's all scalable. What would be easy to manage in New York City may not be able to be managed as well in Snyder, Nebraska. But the fact of the matter is, you have to be ready to pivot. I just want to say on behalf of the fire service to the 2 fire chiefs that Greg's well, he's failing at retirement, but he's technically retired, and Otto is moving on to be our Metropolitan Fire Chief Secretary with the IFC and the NFPA. I thank y'all for your time, for your wisdom, and for being willing to share with us. Dr. Gonzalez, Dr. Smith, I'm blessed in Plano. I got Dr. Mark Gamber. He's a rock star, but I know there's a lot of fire chiefs in this call right now whose heads are nodding about, man, we wish we had those guys as our medical directors. The way that y'all are hands-on, the way you integrate with your troops, the way you train with them, the way you trust them, and just the way you represent them, I know they got to be beaming with pride in y'all's jurisdiction. So I thank both of y'all for attending with us. I wish we had another hour, because I know everybody's, we've got a great attendance today, some good questions. So again, I thank y'all. Appreciate you being here. It's been a success. Nan, thank you for, as always, putting this together in the background for us, and Ken LaSala with the IFC. It's been very enjoyable. I hope people don't have to deal with mass casualties in their jurisdictions, but the fact of the matter is there'll be one probably before the week's out somewhere. So thank you all. Thank you for our listeners being here, and I bid everybody a safe and good day. Thank you all again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.